Mary Evelyn Armstrong was one of the first librarians to arrive at the Hispanic Society of America. Her passport indicates she was born in Illinois in 1869. At the Hispanic Society, Armstrong worked as cataloger of prints and photographs in 1921, then as chief of that department, and later became curator of publications. One of the first assignments that the Society's founder, Archer Huntington, charged her with was traveling to Portugal. Her principal mission was to obtain graphic material about the country, mainly photographs. In his diary from 1920, Huntington expresses the need to increase the number of images and documents about Portugal, its cities, traditions, and people. He also writes of his desire that Armstrong be the one to carry this work forward. Armstrong's expedition was christened as the Portuguese Photographic Expedition, 1920 to 1921. The event was an exceptional occurrence, not only because it was the first expedition led by one of the Hispanic Society's librarians, but because Armstrong did it by herself, traveling alone. Upon arriving at the Portuguese capital, she sought those who would become her travel companions. The writer Elsie Spicer Eales, who provided a list of the most interesting places in Portugal, and then introduced her to a series of people who were experts in the history and traditions of the country, in addition to being avid photograph collectors. The other individual was Mary Brofton, secretary of the British consulate in Lisbon, who acted as her interpreter and stayed in contact with Armstrong through her return to New York for reasons related to customs. Armstrong traveled all over Portugal, compiling an incredible number of photos, books, magazines, engravings, and a few pamphlets, representing the architecture, art, costume, customs, and popular life of Portugal. Over 6 months, Armstrong assembled all the materials for the Hispanic Society's archive, a valuable source of information for the study of the history of photography in Portugal. She met with some of the most well-known Portuguese photographers, like Alvao O. J. Nunes Ribeiro. She visited atypical establishments in search of photographs, including stationery and pastry shops. Acquiring photographs of high quality was of the utmost importance. In a letter addressed to Miss Brofton, Armstrong underlines her desire to obtain, quote, good pictures, even if it costs a little more to get them, unquote, referring to her hope of obtaining images from the famous photographer Domingos Alvao. In the letter to Brofton, Armstrong states, I would like very much to have street scenes taken from an elevation, a window, or balcony, whenever that is possible. Through her dedication to Huntington's direction, Mary Armstrong accomplished her mission, and her legacy remains at the institution's archive. When searching for employees to hire, Huntington's usual practice was to inquire at universities for women. In 1920, Elizabeth de Guy Drapier, the Hispanic Society's head of cataloging and future curator of painting, wrote Dunbar, stating, we have a vacancy here for an expert cataloger. With a desirable salary of $125 a month, Dunbar accepted the position and began work in October of 1920 as a librarian, and in a few months her title was changed to that of cataloger. Huntington wished to mold his employees into specialists for each area represented by the collection. For this reason, studies abroad would be essential, and in September of 1922, Dunbar embarked on a voyage to Europe, accompanied by her colleagues Margaret E. White, Beatrice Gilman Prosky, Florence Lewis May, and Eleanor E. Sherman. The plan was to visit the Iberian Peninsula for the majority of the trip, with stops in Paris and London. Prosky referred to the preparations for the trip, stating, Mr. Huntington himself planned a trip for 5 of us with my mother as chaperone in 1922. He had a page with a detailed map of Spain xeroxed from Styler's Hand Atlas and marked out our route for us. During their travels, the women came into direct contact with the culture that they had only read about back in New York. One of Dunbar's assignments was to photograph buildings tied to Portuguese or Spanish personalities who played a role in history, art, or literature, and in particular, those who were members of the society. The first photographs depicted the homes of Portuguese writers Camilo Castelo Branco and Antonio Feliciano de Castilho. Her images of streets demonstrate the gradual changes that have taken place, generated by urbanism and the growth of cities, and serve as documents for the study of buildings now destroyed or having gone through radical transformations. They allow viewers to understand the city life, details specific to distinct neighborhoods, and the aesthetics of the period. Overhead hanging wires provide electric light, the railways allow streetcars to cross, and pedestrians walk in front of the camera, unnoticed. Once in Spain, in the Galician city of La Coruña, their expedition led them to number 11 Taberna Street, the residence of Emilia Pardo Bazán, writer and honorary member of the Hispanic Society, who in 1913 won the Society's Medal for Arts and Literature. They also considered it important to photograph the home of writer and poet Narcisa Pérez Reollo y Soto de Boado. In Madrid, the women travelers visited museums and cultural institutions, many of which were tied to the Hispanic Society and its founder, such as El Instituto Valencia de Don Juan, established by Guillermo Osma y School, one of Huntington's dear friends. The visit to Toledo was obligatory. Thanks to Huntington's patronage, the Casa del Greco was founded as a center for culture and study, and stood over the land on which the Greek painter was believed to have lived. Dunbar photographed the house and the sites related to his life and work, such as the residence of Cardinal Fernando Niño de Guevara, whose portrait hangs at New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. Dunbar returned to Spain in 1924 to take more and better photographs, with the plan of using the images to support the research of her colleague Beatrice Gilman Prosky. Although never published, Dunbar created a notebook entitled Spanish Houses, using the 70 photographs from her 1922 expedition and the ones obtained during an additional trip in 1924. It is easy to see the impact that these voyages had on the professional and personal development of these women. After less than 1 year at the Hispanic Society, Dunbar joined the group of researchers in the museum department as a curator and was also included as a member of the society. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video.